Hi, this is Timothy Zahn, author of Thrawn, and you're listening to Star Wars Reactions. Good for you.
There's been an awakening. Have you felt it?
In 1977, George Lucas formed a legacy.
The Force is with me, and I am with the Force.
Inspired by mythology, his saga has become a passion for many.
Feel the Force around you.
His legend has become our story.
It's true. All of it.
One of resistance,
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
rebellion,
Rebellion is built on hope.
and redemption.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
This is Star Wars Reactions.
Remember, the Force will be with you. Always.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 106 of Star Wars Reactions. We're going to have a good show for you today. I hope you enjoy it. My name is Aaron Harris. I am one half of your hosting team here at Star Wars Reactions. Not joining me today is my other half, the Chewbacca to my Han Solo, the 3PO to my R2, the David Motters. He is still out on hiatus, so he's not able to join me. But I wanted to drop this special episode. I mean, if you're not aware, February 12th is coming up of 2023. Is our 3-year anniversary of Star Wars Reactions. That is the day that we released our very first episode of Star Wars Reactions. It's not our first episode we've released together because we did Resistance Reactions before that and Rebels Reactions before that when we were part of Coffee with Kenobi. But when we separated and went on our own and rebranded, episode 1 of Star Wars Reactions was February 12th. And of course, our very first episode that we did back then was a Get to Know Us episode where we kind of introduced ourselves, talked about who we are and our Star Wars journey. But that was 3 years ago. That was 105 episodes ago. And we've been getting some questions about our from our listeners, from you guys, from you men and women, asking us who we are, what feeds our fandom. And so, since David is still out on hiatus, and since it is officially Star Wars Podcast Day, and I didn't want to miss out this year, I decided to sit down and talk with myself. That's right. I am going to share with you my Star Wars journey. I'm going to ask myself, after I share my journey, I'm going to ask myself literally the same questions that we ask our guests when we do our reaction chats. So you'll get to hear my thoughts and get to hear about my fandom. And of course, when David is back, we have time between episodes and we can do a special again. We will record one of these with David's point of view. And I just thought it'd be something fun and interesting to do. So let's talk my Star Wars journey. Okay. Well, I remember watching Star Wars a lot growing up. The original trilogy. I wasn't alive when the first two came out. But when Return of the Jedi, I was kicking when Jedi came out. And, but I was so young, I didn't even know it existed. But I remember, growing up and mom and dad had recorded Star Wars, A New Hope, the original Star Wars, off of TV. It was on TV. They got a VHS tape, if you all remember what those are, and recorded the movie for me. And I watched that thing till it broke. And then they recorded it again, and I watched it till it broke. And this was all while I was growing up overseas. My parents were missionaries, so I grew up in South America in a small country called Uruguay, which is way down in the southern cone, south of Brazil. And I really loved it down there. I spent many years down there, close to 10 years down there of my youth. And I really consider Uruguay my second home. I got un corazón de vida, a divided heart when it comes to, and I love my country. I love living in the U.S. I love being American, but at the same point, my heart bleeds for Uruguay as well. It is literally a second home for me. And that's where I got to watch a lot of Star Wars. It's also where I discovered the expanded universe too. I remember watching Star Wars and flipping over the dining room table, or the coffee table, not the dining room table. My mom would have killed me. But the coffee table in the living room where I was watching it, and hide behind it with a blaster. And as the stormtroopers would become pouring onto the Tantive 4, I'd be popping up and taking shots at stormtroopers. It's just what I did. And so I grew up watching the original trilogy. And then like I've said in past episodes, I never did much with the expanded universe. But I did discover the expanded universe by finding we were at a grocery store in Uruguay called Tienda Inglesa. Beautiful. It was a great show. Not a grocery store by any means of an American standard, for sure, but it was a very nice grocery store. I really liked Tienda Inglesa. I shopped there a lot when we lived there. But I remember they had the checkouts. Mom and Dad were checking out, and out past the checkouts, just kind of like they do at Walmart, they have the little shops behind the registers. So I went through the registers and went to the little bookshop, because I always would go in and see if they had the latest issue of Starlog magazine. If you don't know Starlog was a science fiction magazine that basically just reported on anything and everything science fiction. And I would always look to Starlog to see what was going on in the world of Star Trek, in the world of Star Wars. And I enjoyed it. But I remember going in one day looking for a Starlog. They didn't have any, so I was just kind of browsing around. And, of course, I'm in Uruguay, so the main language is Spanish. So literally 90% of everything is in Spanish. But they would get some things in English, like that Starlog magazine. But I remember going through after unsuccessfully looking for a Starlog, and walking down the aisles looking at books, and I look up at the top shelf, and sitting up there is this blue covered book with the big Star Wars letters on the front. It was a paperback. I'm like, where in the world? What's this? A Star Wars book? And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I don't recognize the title or anything. It's not any of the movies. It's not Star Wars. It's not A New Hope. It's not Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. And what is this? So, of course, at that age, I was too young and too short to reach the top shelf. So I politely asked somebody to grab it for me, and they grabbed it and handed it to me. And I looked at it, and it was Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn. And I was like, well, this looks pretty cool. And negotiated with my parents, and they ended up buying me that book that day, because it was actually in English. Why they had an English copy of Heir to the Empire in a Spanish-speaking country, I will never know. I call it destiny, because I got it. I still have it sitting on the shelf here next to me. I'm looking at it. But it was a great read. I absolutely read it cover to cover, couldn't put it down, loved it, and even went as far as then making a list of books, because, of course, the sequels were already listed in the book, Dark Force Rising and The Last Battle. So I made a list and sent them off to my grandmother, who was here in the United States, and she found them and mailed them to me. And of course, the way the postal system works down there, she mailed it from here in June, and it made it in June of the following year. It's just how it works. It's just how some things would get there in a week, some things would get there the following year. You just never knew with the mail system. But that was my first exposure to the expanded universe. But after that, being in South America and not having any access to, of course, didn't even know the internet was a thing or anything. So I couldn't join the official fan club and have stuff mailed to me or anything like that because I was overseas, and I literally was limited to the Zahn trilogy and the original movies. So eventually, I didn't get bored with it. I just kind of moved on to other fandoms, namely Star Trek, and that kind of just became my thing for a while. Eventually came back to the States, went to college, and started working. And of course, I had gotten episode 1 when it had come out I missed it when it was in theaters, but I got it when it was released on home video. So I got it and watched it then. Thought it was pretty good, but it didn't, light a fire under my butt or anything, as a fan or anything. But I watched it, enjoyed it. A couple years later, while I was working, episode 2 came out. And that was literally the first Star Wars movie. Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. That was the first movie I ever saw, first Star Wars movie I ever saw in a movie theater. So I remember watching it with a coworker. We got off work and went and watched it. And I remember sitting there watching it, and I had just worked a 12-hour shift. I was exhausted. I remember falling asleep. And dozing pretty much through the majority of the movie until little Yoda comes waddling in with his stick, drops his stick, pulls out his lightsaber, and then just goes flipping all over the place fighting Dooku. At that point, I was on the edge of my seat going, what did I miss? Of course, I came back and saw it the next day and enjoyed it. Saw episode 3 in the theater, and of course have seen every Star Wars movie since in the theaters, with the sequels and of course the Solo and Rogue One. But really, none of those experiences with the prequels really got me into fandom again. It wasn't until 2013, I believe it was, 2012, when a friend of mine, you've heard me mention him before, my best friend Robbie, him and his wife were over at our house on a Friday night. The kids were playing, and we were all talking. He's like, "Hey, you should go with me to Hollywood Studios tomorrow," because both families had Disney passes at that time. He's like, "It's Star Wars weekends. We're going to go meet Ashley Eckstein." I'm like, "Who?" I had never seen Clone Wars. I had no clue who this woman was. He's like, no, you need to go see. And he pulled up a photo, showed me her picture, and said she does the voice of Ahsoka. And I'm like, in the Clone Wars, I'm like, I've never seen it, but I'll go with you. And my wife was like, yeah, just go, have fun. So we got up and we went. We had a blast. I had never been to Star Wars weekends before and had been a pass holder for several years at that point, and never had gone, but I thoroughly enjoyed this trip because I'm a big John Williams fan. And that was all they were playing was Star Wars music, which is all John Williams music. And really had a blast with Robbie that day. And met Ashley, and I walked up and he got his autograph. Then I went up to get an autograph from her, and she's like, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "Good. How are you?" She's like, So what do you think of Ahsoka? And I'm like, I honestly looked at her and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. I've never seen your show. I have no clue who you were until my friend over there told me this morning you voiced a character on the show. And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah, really. I've never heard of you. No clue who you are. And she's like, all right. So then she proceeded to hold up the autograph line, which there were about 30 people behind me. She held up the autograph line and proceeded to basically give me the history of Ahsoka to date, right then and there, and fill me in. Just talk to me about the character, talk to me about the Clone Wars, and just kind of brought me up to speed on who the character was. And I was like, that was pretty cool that she did that. We took a picture, she signed the autograph, we left. Like, that's pretty cool she did that. I'm mad respect for that. And that's somebody, a celebrity would do something like that. I think that's pretty cool. So we're driving home, and my buddy Robbie's like, hey, we're going next week to see James Arnold Taylor. I'm like, who? He goes, the other host, the guy that does Obi-Wan Kenobi. Oh, okay. Still had no clue who he was. So we went back the next week, and pretty much the same situation occurred again. And I walked up to James, I'm talking to James, and like, honestly, dude, I still have not seen the show. And I know you're the host of the event, but that's pretty much all I know about you. That, and you do the voice of Obi-Wan. And so he actually did exactly what Ashley did, and took about 5-10 minutes with me and just talked about the Clone Wars and talked about how Obi-Wan's role in the Clone Wars. And it was really good. And I was super impressed by this point, but that these two people had taken time out of their busy lives and schedules to explain to me their part in this show. But not only that, it impressed me how much passion they had for their roles and for their characters, and not just for their roles and characters, but for the fans as well. And I really, that blew my mind. And I really was like, okay, you know what? I really need to go back and watch the show. So I went and got the seasons off of iTunes, and because at that point I think they were going into season 4. I went and rewatched, basically binge watched them, and really enjoyed the show. Like, this is pretty cool. And from that point on, I started trying to take in as much Star Wars as I could. Discovered podcasts and started listening. The Force Cast was the original one I listened to, then a little bit of Rebel Force Radio. Then I discovered Coffee with Kenobi. And I discovered Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z, literally on their first episode, the first or second episodes when I started listening. So I've followed them from the very beginning, and started writing in and communicating with them, and actually started getting along with them pretty good. And next thing I know, they were talking about, a year had gone by, they're talking about Star Wars weekends again. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to be at Star Wars weekends. I can tell you all about it. So I became their de facto Star Wars. And I think you even heard a writer mention it in our recent episode. I was the Star Wars weekend special correspondent for Coffee with Kenobi. And I had a blast at that point. I did guest spots with them. I was a blogger for Coffee with Kenobi. And then during the second season of Rebels, they asked me to take over the show. And that's how I got started in podcasting, was I took over Rebels Reactions as part of the Coffee with Kenobi network. And it kind of grew from there. Had a blast during the Star Wars Fan Podcast Awards, Rebels Reactions was voted best show by the fans, that best TV review show, which was shocking and humbling at the same time. I was honored, and it just progressed from there. I did the rest of Rebels. When Rebels ended, I went and did Resistance Reactions, brought in David Motters, who I had met during Star Wars weekends, believe it or not. David became my co-host, and we did Resistance Reactions together. And by that point, toward the end of Resistance, the Coffee with Kenobi community of shows had grown. Each individual show had grown so much. and with some of the restrictions they put in place with celebration and podcast stages and stuff like that, we all broke up and kind of went our individual ways, and all still remain good friends right now, but we went our own way. And when Resistance ended, we rebranded the show to Star Wars Reactions, and the rest is literally history from there. We've done 100. This is our 106th episode. We have 3 years in the making. It's been a wild ride. And that really has been my full journey through fandom. I mean, there's been highlights here and there that I didn't address, but that were great, like meeting the cast of Rebels and before the show even aired, and stuff like that. I had an incident with Ian McDermott at Star Wars Weekends, where we just literally physically walked right into each other. It was crazy. But those are great memories that I have from that time, and it's been a fantastic journey, and I've loved every minute of it. So yeah, it's been great. But let's get a little deeper into my fandom here. Let's go through these questions that we ask our listeners every time, or our listeners, or our guests, I should say, every time they come on for our reactions chat. So let's get this started. And I think I pretty much answered the first one, which was how and when did my fandom start, which is pretty much the journey I just took you on, back to the Tienda Inglesa store in Montevideo, Uruguay. What was it about Star Wars that appealed to you as a fan? For me, it's just what really appealed to me and got me really deep into fandom were the people. If it was just me watching a show or the movies, I would enjoy them. But I wouldn't probably be geeking out and fanning over them like I do now. What really got me into fandom was being at Star Wars weekends, meeting many people that I now call friends, just because we like Star Wars. It's the only reason we met. That was the only commonality we had. And just spending 12 hours for 3 days straight each weekend with these people at Hollywood Studios, just really, it just grew my confidence in the fandom and people, and it made, to me, the Star Wars community is what made fandom so appealing to me, because it's been such a incredible experience. And it's so amazing that so many people from so many different backgrounds and everything can have that same passion for the same movie. It's great. It's definitely one of the biggest things that appealed to me. Next question is, what has been fandom's biggest impact on me? Fandom's biggest impact is doing what I'm doing right now. It's sitting behind a microphone and talking about Star Wars. That has had the biggest impact on me, because it has opened doors that I never would have dreamed of, with going to Celebration, going to meeting Timothy Zahn recently, the most recent event, talking to people like Jason Fry, Adam Bray, meeting people like James Arnold Taylor, Ashley Eckstein, Vanessa Marshall from Rebels, and the whole cast there. Those doors were open because of podcasting. And I would say definitely that has had the biggest impact in my life and in my fandom. All right. The next question is, do I have a favorite Star Wars moment or experience? I would say my favorite Star Wars, I got a lot of them, trust me, and they all, most of them evolve around Star Wars weekends. My favorite moment, though, was definitely an event that was something that happened at Star Wars weekends. We had, my buddy Robbie and I, we had gotten done with our autograph session. I don't even remember who it was at this point, but our next event we were going to be at James Arnold Taylor's. No, it wasn't James Arnold Taylor's show. It was, we were going to a show. I can't remember what show it was, but it was in the Premier Theater, which is now gone. It's been tore down, but it was a part of Hollywood Studios. But we got there like super early. We had like an hour before the show. So we literally just went down and sat down on the ramp going into the seating area, sat down in the shade to just rest and relax for a little bit. And while we're sitting there, all of a sudden the side door flies open right next to us, and out comes a Disney employee along with James Arnold Taylor. Of course, by this point I had met James 2 or 3 times just doing autographs at Star Wars weekends. But I was wearing, at this point, I was the special correspondent for Coffee with Kenobi. Had the Coffee with Kenobi t-shirt on, sitting there, and he comes flying out, and he's like, "Hey guys, how you doing?" We're like, "Hey, how you doing, James?" And he was walking fast because he got somewhere to be, and after he got past us, he froze mid-step and whipped around, looked at my shirt, and he goes, "Coffee with Kenobi, I know that show." And then he came back, and I got up and introduced myself as the special correspondent, and we started talking for a minute, and because he didn't have a lot of time. I think he was on his way to his autograph session, honestly. And we were talking, and he's like, "Well, come on, let's get a picture." And so I have this totally random picture of, and I'll put it in the show notes. If I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes, of me and James outside of the Premier Theater. Nobody's around. Nobody's there. It's just me and him having a good time. And I love that memory. To me, that was just fantastic. It just went to reinforce how awesome of a man James Arnold Taylor is. And definitely has been great. All right. How have I seen fandom change throughout the years? That's insane, really. Fandom's changed a lot ever since, with the Disney takeover and everything. We've basically just seen Star Wars explode, and it has been, most of my career heavily in fandom has been in the Disney era, right as Disney took over. So a lot of my memories have been the transition to the Disney takeover, the expanded universe now becoming Legends, and the cancellation of the Clone Wars. So I've seen it go from very limited content to just an explosion of Star Wars, where there's so much there we don't even know how much we're actually getting. And it has just been a wild ride. And that's been really the biggest change is the amount of stuff we're getting from Lucasfilm. And I will say this too. I've seen fans get a lot more passionate with what they like and don't like, which is good and bad at the same time, because it does create conflict, but we don't want conflict. We want a big old happy family. So, all right, let's move on, because I'm running out of time here, and I want to make sure I get through these questions here. And some of the harder hitting questions are some of the ones here at the end. If you've listened to our reactions chats, you know. The next question up is, the Star Wars saga has many themes that run through the stories. Themes like redemption, hope. What theme from the saga has made the biggest impact on me? That's a tough question, because you'd think, knowing I was doing this, I would have taken the time to think it out clearly. And no, I'm not. I'm actually reading I literally just copied and pasted the questions in the show notes so I'd have them. I didn't give them any thoughts at all. So you're literally getting me shooting from the hip with these answers. But they're from the heart too. So, there's so many good themes in these, in the saga, like redemption, like hope for the future, like good defeating evil. I mean, and just stuff like that. But honestly, I want to say probably the most consistent one that's had a big impact on me, that has had the biggest impact on me, has been the redemption stories that Star Wars tells. Because people think, okay, redemption story, we're talking about the redemption of Anakin Skywalker, but there's so much more than that. We have, yes, the trilogy's redemption of Anakin Skywalker. Rogue One, we have honestly, it's this redemption story of everybody on that team. It's the redemption story of Jen Erso. It's the redemption story of Cassian Andor. It's the Imperial pilot's redemption story. I mean, it is Baze Malbus. It's his redemption story. I mean, there's so many people walking their redemption stories in that movie. It's redunculous. And I know that's not a word, but I'm using it anyway, because it is redunculous. But it's redemption probably is the biggest factor for me, because, if we can't be redeemed for all of our mistakes and all of our errors and all of our sins, what point is it? What point is there? And so the redemption for me is such a huge topic, because not only does it give me the redemption stories, give me hope, it definitely, I relate it to other aspects. It relates to my faith as well, my faith in God and the redemption He has given me. So I would say that has the biggest impact. Theme that's had the biggest impact. So the last question we have before we go into what we call our speed round is, how do I feel about the current direction of the saga? I feel good about the saga right now, to be honest. We're getting great stuff through Disney Plus, with the shows, the animated shows and so on. So I'm feeling good about it so far. There is something about Star Wars when you see it on a big screen as a movie. So I kind of I would kind of like to see us get back into movies. But I don't think, I think the mistake that Lucasfilm made right after Disney bought him was rushing so many movies out in such a short period of time, with 7, 8, and 9, then Rogue One and Solo. I mean, they got off to a good start with The Force Awakens. I thought that was a great start to a beginning of a sequel trilogy. I thought both Solo and Rogue One were phenomenal standalone films. But they kind of struggled. I liked Last Jedi. I honestly enjoyed it more than Rise of Skywalker, to be honest. But there was the flow just did not feel Star Warsy to me. They're still good movies. I still own all three. I'll watch them occasionally. Force Awakens more than the others, but I still enjoyed. So all that to say, I think the saga is going in a good direction, and can't wait to see more. All right. The next 5 questions are what we call our speed round questions. These are 5 very simple questions, which just require one quick answer. Okay. And go from there. So if we're ready, set, go. Favorite movie? That would be Star Wars: A New Hope, the original. That's my favorite. Favorite character? Duh, it's Chopper. Chopper's the man. Chopper's the droid, I should say, man. The murder bot. Mass murder bot, I saw somebody say online. But I love Chopper. Human would be Obi-Wan Kenobi. I love Obi-Wan Kenobi, especially after seeing him fleshed out in the Clone Wars, and now even more in the Kenobi series. So Chopper's my overall favorite character. If I have to make it a actual person and not a droid, it would be Obi-Wan Kenobi. Empire or Rebellion? Would I join the Empire or the Rebellion? I would probably, honestly, that's tough. I like the Empire's uniforms, but I'd probably end up with the Rebellion, honestly. I just think those uniforms are snazzy. Favorite moment from a show or movies? Favorite moment? Gosh, there's so many great moments. I would have to say my favorite moment in Star Wars is the ending of Revenge of the Sith. After Anakin and Obi-Wan have had their battle, Anakin's laying there with his arm and legs gone on the lava bank, and he's catching fire. And Obi-Wan does that heartfelt, emotional monologue. "You are my brother, Anakin. You were supposed to destroy the Sith, not join them." That was, to me, that was a huge scene and very chilling, very, very important moment. And I would probably say one of my favorite moments. Favorite soundtrack or song? Yes. All of them. But if I have to pick one, it's very close between Binary Sunset and Across the Stars. Binary Sunset from the 77 Star Wars soundtrack, and of course Across the Stars from Attack of the Clones. So those are those are the speed round questions, and that pretty much wraps it up. That's pretty much the reactions chat there. So you pretty much know everything about my fandom there. I mean, I still got a lot more stories to tell, but I'm running out of time here. So I do want to go ahead and start wrapping things up here. Let me know what you thought of my journey through fandom, and let me know about your journey. I would love to hear about your fandom journey. You can, of course, hit us up anywhere on our social media accounts. We're on Facebook and Twitter at SW Reactions Pod. We are on Instagram, Pinterest, and now Tumblr, where you can find all of our show notes at SW Reactions. And of course, you can always email us, swreactions@gmail.com as well. Hit us up, let us know. If you want to reach out to David and tell him how much you miss him, like I do, I miss him a lot, reach out to him. You can hit him up on Twitter at David_Modders or on Instagram at David Modders. You can hit him up either place there. If you want to talk Star Wars with me, best way to do that is Twitter, honestly, at TAHarris121079. You can hit me up there anytime, anywhere, and that is how it goes. So, I end the show every time with a dad joke of the week, but I'm flying solo, so it's kind of rough to tell a joke to myself. So, yeah, let's just see how this goes. I will tell you the joke, and you will work on getting me, give me some feedback on it. You can hit me up on Twitter. You can hit me up on Instagram, or not Instagram, through the show on Instagram, of course. But hit me up and let me know what you think of the dad joke of the week this week, okay? All right, here we go. What was Lando's nickname before he became a skilled pilot? What was Lando's name before he became a skilled pilot? Are you ready? His name was Crashto. Get it? Lando Crashto. Lando Crashto. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening in. We appreciate each and every one of you. Y'all are the best. Shout out to my co-host, David. Love you, brother. Praying for you. Hope to have you back at my side soon. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Y'all are the greatest listeners out there. Thank you for 3 incredibly awesome years. I cannot thank y'all enough for all the love and support you've given us. We have a blast doing this, but y'all make it so much more fun. So thank y'all for listening. Remember, this is your place for elegant discussion for a more civilized age.
If you'd like to share your thoughts, you can email us at show@starwarsreactions.com for our show notes and the latest news from the Star Wars universe. Visit our website at www.starwarsreactions.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at SWReactionsPod or on Facebook at Star Wars Reactions. If you enjoy our show, please leave a review on iTunes. This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or by Lucasfilm Limited. It's intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars. All names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and the respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Star Wars Reactions unless otherwise indicated. Star Wars Reactions. Elegant discussion for a more civilized age.